Okay, it just told me I was being recorded. Let me click all this here. Well, I am Shirley. I am an alcoholic. I am honored, although nervous, to be here this evening. I'm also hoping that the little fuzzy things in the house cooperate. They've ignored me all evening, and as soon as we had voices, they have started hovering around the workstation. But I am an alcoholic. I saw somebody from San Clemente in there, so that is my hometown. I originally got sober at the El Toro Club, which is now called the Saddleback Valley Fellowship Center, 6905. I wandered into a meeting and they told me I never had to drink again, and I didn't understand it. And they told me to keep coming back, and I did. And I'm grateful that I've never had to go out and experiment again yet, because as we know, we are all eligible too. My sobriety date 6905. I'm out here in Hampton, Virginia now. I've been out here since 2008, and it has been a whirlwind of adventure like everything else in my sobriety. I do get really nervous before I speak. It's part of that alcoholism that I have, where I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. So I know I'm the best thing since sliced bread, but I'm worried you're not going to quite recognize it as well as I do. So when I first started speaking a long time ago in California, the main speaker, which was usually my sponsor, had to find a 10-minute speaker. So they would do these opening things like this, and then you'd have the little cute little newcomer do the 10-minute pitch, and then we'd take a cigarette break and everybody would come back and listen to the main speaker. So the very first time I did that, I was like, what do I do? I was going to write notes and all those things. And my sponsor said to me that she just takes a deep breath and she asked God to be with her for the next 45 minutes and to use her to, deliver the message of AA that someone in the audience needs to hear. And that's what I do today. So hopefully someone out there gets something from it today. And if you didn't, I'll give you a business card from my higher power, and you can talk to them about the lack of spirituality you got from my pitch tonight. One of the other things I like to do, which also helps focus me, is, something in this big book of ours always seems to be resonating with me. And I know that's from, being around here for a couple of 24 hours. But when I was thinking about this, what came in mind to me today, especially with it being the holiday season, is the passage on page 47, which really kind of opened up my window into being able to be an AA and starting the journey where it talks about, the purpose of this book, and all of our purpose is to build a relationship. And this is a paraphrase, please don't write it down. The purpose of this is to find a higher power that can help get us out of this disaster mess that we have made. And it is on page 47, and I will read it for you. And it says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And I got sober. Like I said, it was 6905. It was a Thursday. I had been out for one of my regular evenings, and I was at a point in my drinking where I was really trying, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was really trying to figure out how I could control and enjoy my drinking, because when I enjoyed it, it was out of control. And when I controlled it, I didn't enjoy it. And I had been out and I was like, I'm not going to get drunk tonight, because some of my friends were taking the next day off work because they had, as my friend Gabby says, planning to get tore up from the floor up. And in my head, I went, good, I can finally not get the drunk hat. Someone is going to get drunker than me. All I have to do is not be the drunkest one. So I did what I was doing at that time. I was switching from scotch to beer. But in this case, it was actually switching to gin, because I think it tastes terrible. So I was going to drink gin and not get drunk, and let this Gabby, who I worked with, who wanted to, be the drunk one for a change. And well, needless to say, that didn't happen. I ended up in my usual state of health, which was essentially passed out. I did at least have the good sense to let somebody drive me home. I'm throwing up on myself in the Jeep. And because I had a really cool Jeep. That was the only thing I really had left going on. And the next morning, I'm up, I'm dressed, I'm in the shower, throwing up in the shower like I did most mornings. I'm at work by 8 o'clock. And here come all the emails. Everybody, oh, I'm calling out today. I'm sick today. I'm sick. And I came to that moment and I had this tiny glimmer of, I don't even know what it was because my brain's turned off all of a sudden, but I had this glimmer that something was really wrong. Like me, who could not stand up, was fine and already plotting what my adventures were going to be for that night before I was even well enough to put a Pepsi in me, because Lord knows I wasn't having coffee or food at that point. And everyone else couldn't even stand. And I looked up online that there was an AA meeting at lunch right around the corner from me. There's that San Clemente person. At the time, the San Clemente Club was closed, so they were over to the Coach House, which is a nightclub music hall. They weren't there. I ended up in El Toro, and that's how I ended up in this silly thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. They gave me a book, which I, also being new to AA, didn't know we didn't write checks. And for anybody who's young, that's a piece of paper that you used to write on that worked like money when you didn't have cash. And you didn't have an ATM card because we didn't have that many ATM cards at that point in time. But they said, no, just take the book. The answers are in the first 164 pages. So me being me and not knowing anything, and still probably having a little liquor on my breath, decided I would take the afternoon off. I would go to the park. I would read these 164 pages and live happily ever after with perfectly controlled drinking. Needless to say, that is not how it worked. But I did get to page 47. And I had a long relationship, in and out of relationship with a God of my understanding. You know, I had grown up as a kid in the Methodist church. We went to Sunday school. We learned all the Bible books, you know, all the books of the Bible, and we'd win candy bars. And being young, I kind of thought God was a Santa Claus. So when some bad stuff happened in our family, I was disappointed. And I said, that's it. I'm not doing any of that. Later on in life, I was starting to recognize that I was not well, you know, that I had problems, that this drinking was out of control. Lots of my other life choices were out of control. And I tried the church again, and I got disappointed. And I had written it off that God was not for me. Church is not for me. And I was already disappointed at that first meeting that people were talking about this higher power thing. But I was uncomfortable and I was miserable, and I was willing to at least try things. And when I got to that page and I read that paragraph, I paused for a moment and I decided that I would at least try to make a deal with God, who I still call higher power. And I said, okay, almost my exact words, I will believe in the God of this book as long as every single thing in this book comes true. The minute something is not true, I am out of here. And I meant it. And I still mean it, and I'm still here. So for anybody who is new out there, I can tell you that where it says that you just have to be willing to believe, and there are no rules and there are no hard terms to be a part of this program spiritually, I mean it. The book means it. And probably most of the 172 people on this call can tell you that we mean it. I started with that little bit, that I would believe what was in the book. In 164 pages of a blue book that I got from some, now I know crazy, but seemed reasonably normal people at lunchtime on a Thursday in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. You know, and from there it's kind of jump started me. You know, we talk a lot about what it was like and what happened and what it's like now, and then we get distracted. So I do want to talk a little bit about what it's like now before we run out of time. Today, my life, 16 years sober, handful of 24 hours. My life is amazing. It really is. It is amazing. I have more than I ever dreamed that I would have. When I got here, I had a Jeep, and that was it. And I couldn't afford the Jeep I had. It was wonderful. I had, you know, hard top off and all the toys and the bells and the whistles, but I couldn't make the payments on it, and I couldn't afford the gas on it. And that was the only thing I had going for me when I walked into all those bars and all those places. I was loud and I was obnoxious and I was saying, look at me, I'm having fun. I can prove it. Look at my Jeep. Look at me, I'm having fun. See, fooling myself like the kid, whistling in the dark, like it talks about in the big book. So I started working these steps in here. And today I have a very moderate car, totally not what I expected, right? For all of these things they promised me in those promises. I saw you guys read them at the end, but I don't have fear of economic insecurity because in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've learned what's a reasonable expectation for how far my money goes. And I've learned how to trust in a higher power that, the money's going to be there for the things that I need to be actually safe and happy, like groceries, like electric bills. There's so many things I can do besides just drinking in the bar and then trying to collect quarters to pay things like light bills and rent, So it has been amazing. I have a wonderful job. I have a wonderful house. I have a wonderful partner. I have wonderful pets they always make me nervous. They are leaving me alone right now. So hopefully nobody rings the doorbell. I have a wonderful life. And to quote Doomsday Dave, as we called him, I am an extremely reasonably happy person. But it wasn't easy. And we talk about doing these steps, and that's what I had to do. I had to get a sponsor. I've had 3 sponsors in my life, 3 official sponsors. The first one, I didn't know her nickname was Terrible Teresa, but she was assigned to me. And Terrible Teresa sent me to this class they were having. And I don't know, I was very foggy. I don't know what it was, but it was the way the big book was, or the steps were intended to be done. So I showed up on Saturday morning at 7 because I didn't know any better. And I just was following directions. At that point, I couldn't even, this was Saturday. So I was 2 days sober. I couldn't even figure out what to eat. And people put me in the car and feeding me pancakes and making sure I had coffee and eating pie. And, but they told me to come to this thing on Saturday. So I went to the thing. I got assigned to Teresa, who I now know is called Terrible Teresa. And we did all the steps in 4 weeks. Now, I would not today say that I did all the steps and was ready to live a happy, healthy life, but I did get all 12 steps worked to the best of my ability that someone with, I guess at that point it was 32 days sober by the time we finished that 4-week class. I have since had to do them again because they didn't count, but I feel like that gave me a really good foundation, to get my life started and to start doing these things. My second sponsor, Becky, I love her. I have continued to stay in touch with her. She was my sponsor for about the next 9 months. And then my current sponsor has been my sponsor the rest of the time. She just picked up 40 years this year, and her sponsor picked up 41 years and has unfortunately since passed. But, it's an amazing story what happens in AA, the friendships that we build and the lifelong friends that for 40 years, she had the same confidant and the same teacher in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm very pleased to think that I'm on the same track with that. But, we talked about step 1, our life is unmanageable, and we're powerless over alcohol. And because I had this really great Jeep and I hadn't been fired yet, referred to myself as a functional alcoholic, or a high bottom alcoholic for about, a few minutes. And then people in our club kindly pointed out that people who don't have, high bottoms don't still have vomit chunks in their car. That's not a very high bottom thing to do. And people who are functional alcoholics don't spend most of their morning sick and then the rest of their day planning drinking and then trying to figure out what's the best route home where there's not going to be any cops to bust me. And people who have manageable lives have money in the bank and they pay their bills. And it very quickly dawned on me that my life wasn't as manageable as I thought it was. And after a few days of not drinking, I very quickly realized how sick I was and how unable to stop I really was. And I was powerless over alcohol, and my life was very unmanageable. And they say that's the only step you have to work perfect. It's probably I guess it is the only one you have to work perfect, because if I forget I'm an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable, then my life becomes extra unmanageable because I am on the track to go out. And that's not good for me. It's not good for the people around me. And it's definitely not good for the universe, because I am the kind of alcoholic who makes a mess of the world one drink at a time. Working with step 2, step 3, I made a very, very basic beginning when I was in the park and I read that paragraph. And for me, I have learned that I need to stay at that very, very basic beginning that I made in that park. There is a higher power and I'm not it. And that's all I really have to know. For me, I think about my higher power as being, I first noticed it when I was up in the mountains and I heard the wind blowing through and you guys are in Tennessee. I think you guys have trees, right? Yeah. I'm still in California. Like we don't have trees till you go up in the mountains. But I happened to be up in the mountains and I was sitting out there smoking a cigarette like a good alcoholic. And you could hear the wind coming like from far, far away. And then you could see it rustling in the trees. And you could smell the sense that it was coming, that it was blowing in with you. And you could feel it on your skin. And I just had this moment like, you know what? This is what my higher power is like. My higher power is kind of everywhere, yet I can't see it or hear it or smell it, yet it's affecting everything around me and it's impacting everything around me. And that's the conception of a higher power that I came up with. And for me, that's where I'm leaving it. I get told to shallow out because, I would get told you're too deep, quit overthinking things. So I just need to stay shallow and just accept that there is a higher power. It is everywhere I need it to be, and it has my best intentions at heart. And my job is to just try to align my will with its and take the next indicated action to do the next right thing, which first of all is not drinking, and secondly is not stabbing. Because I don't see a lot of chuckles, but I used to get told all you have to do today is don't drink. And then because I was a smart aleck, I was 28. I said, oh, really? So I can go running around stabbing people and I'm successful. And then it was added that I'm also not allowed to stab. So I have to do 2 things a day. The rest of you only have to do 1. Stay sober. I have to stay sober and not stab. So working through that was step 3. The next part, people made it sound so scary, this 4th step, this moral inventory. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I am just going to fall apart when I open what is wrong with me, when I start looking deep into these corners. And then when we opened the book, it wasn't that bad at all, because the book told me all I have to do, they trick you by just reading the first page, right? Just make a list of all the resentments I have, all those people who have done me dirty. And boy, oh boy, I had a whole list of people that did me dirty. My aunt didn't stay with us when we were having family trouble, and that was terrible. She was a terrible aunt. No wonder I drink. And my mom was unwell and she committed suicide. No wonder. That was a terrible incident. No wonder I drink. And, my dad didn't do single fatherhood the way I thought he should. I should be drinking for sure. No wonder. Look at all these things that did me dirty. All these people, places, and things not giving me the promotions I deserve, not giving me the scholarships I want, not magically paying my bills, all these things. And then they trick me, right, into doing that 2nd column and that 3rd column. And then you turn the page and, what is my part in this? Which is where, that moral inventory starts to come in. And I wasn't, like I said, I keep saying I wasn't very well because I was really unwell. I was not a well newcomer. I didn't come in and just be like, oh, life is great. Let's move along. I had to have a sponsor kind of help point these things out to me. So we had to look at things like, yeah, that was really terrible that your mom was very ill and that she died by suicide. But there's also probably millions of people that have had that same experience and didn't drink themselves to death. I learned my part in this wasn't that something happened to me, that it's about how I responded. I'm responsible for the action and the reaction, not for the incident. So yes, there were some things that happened to me that were bad and terrible and wrong, but it's not that incident, it's how I responded. So that was my part with that. And we went through all those various things. And what is my part? And I love how excited we get about doing a 5th step. But by the time I got to the 5th step, she pointed out to me that I had already done most of it just because I wasn't well enough to figure out how to do a 4th step. So all we really had to do was review what we had already reviewed. I still chose to do it with a therapist because I was not in a place where I could trust people, because I was still new and had a lot of guilt and shame like we come in with. And I figured that since she was bound by law not to reveal what was in my fifth step, that's who I would do it with. And I do love that our program gives us outs like that. You know, it says it in the book books. We may share certain things with certain people. And I chose to do that. You know, now 16 years later, she knows everything and then some about what has happened in my life and how I respond to things. Working on 6 and 7, to me, that seemed so silly at the surface, right? We're entirely ready to get rid of these defects of character. In my alcoholic brain, I was like, hey, who doesn't want to be perfect? Go ahead, God, take these defects of character from me. That will be wonderful. And then I was disappointed when, 2 hours later, I was still struggling with life and people and all of those things. And I was directed to actually read all the words. And it was, when you do that prayer, it's the defects that stand in my usefulness, in the way of my usefulness, not the ones that just make me unperfect, the ones that stay in my way of being useful. Sorry, the cat's, honey, will you feed her cookies or something? Sorry, the cat's like literally clawing my legs. It's the ones that are in the way of my usefulness to my higher power and to my fellow alcoholics. So it's a lot easier to acknowledge those, So first I had to start with all the main ones for us alcoholics: selfish, self-centered, everything is about me, everything is about me. And I got little tasks to help me practice not being in myself. And that's when I started to learn to go sweep up the cigarette butts in our parking lot, and to make coffee, and to take the secretary's commitment on Saturday nights, not because I needed to, but because the alcoholics needed me to. It's not that I want to, it's what we do what's right, not what's easy. Those are things I learned here in AA. Moving along to 8th step, it's amazing once you get a few months sober, how many things start to come back to you. I joke that as a blackout drinker, my 5th step was pretty short, because there's just a lot of unknowns out there. But as you start to come to, some of those memories start coming back. And it isn't just like, oh, there was that bar, there was this, there was that. Yeah, there's actually some people that I really did some damage to out there. And then trying to figure out, how do I make it right? I did a lot of apologies for a long time. A lot of apologies. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to crash your car. I bumped into a lot of things. Didn't mean to bump into that. Didn't mean to crash through your cabinet. Furniture and I are not friends. Tall furniture is very bad for me when I'm drinking. I didn't mean to do this. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to be better, and I meant it when I said it. I just wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to keep my word because my life was unmanageable. And when I took that first drink, all bets were off. I had no idea what was going to happen next. So when I started making those amends, they were all very receptive, but they weren't very much into believing me. And I have had to do, we call them living amends, but it's living trust building. I was very untrustworthy. In my mind, it was an accident, but in their mind, it doesn't matter if it was an accident. I couldn't be counted on. 6 years later, I was about 6 years sober. My brother had my little baby niece, who I love to death. Her name is Natalie Ray. And she was 4.5. I had been sober over 6 years. And that's when my brother finally decided that I should be the one that would be responsible for her if something happened to him and his wife, Katrina. And by that time I'd been sober for many years, 6 years, I guess not many years. To me, it felt like many years. But, it took 6 years of good, clean living and meaning what I said and demonstrating that I was a changed person and that I was trustworthy before they could make that decision. And today, I was just out there. When I look at her and the relationship that she has with my brother, and that they trust that I would be able to carry on that relationship and bring that much like love and energy to her should something happen, is really quite amazing. And it really is an honor to go from the sister they can't count on to the one who would take over my role as parent. And having lost a parent, I know, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to have a feeling in the middle of my speech. But that's one of the downsides of Alcoholics Anonymous for any newcomers, is that you do have feelings. It's also a positive eventually. But everything comes in both steps. So making those amends and really sticking with them and doing what I say day after day after day after day, year after year, the people I hurt the most are finally coming around and starting to realize that Alcoholics Anonymous works. My brother did share with me that he's gone to a couple Zoom meetings. He's recognized that he might have some trouble. He's still, like I said, he was doing that. And then when we were there, he picked up a 12 pack of some seltzer thing. Sounds terrible to me, but he knows where to go and he knows it works because he can see me and he can see that the change in me with that. 10, 11, and 12, they call those our maintenance steps. I have learned to also keep that nice and simple. When I used to do, I really do. My sponsor has really helped me not drive myself crazy in these past few years. But, she was like, okay, so what are you doing for, spiritual maintenance? I'm like, well, I get up in the morning and I read these pages and the daily reflections and the thing out of the Hazelton, the Al-Anon one and the ACA one. And I always get this look like, I always get like the pat on the head, like, okay, honey, look at the cute little newcomer face from her. And she said, why don't you just try to do one thing well? Don't do 100 things, just do one. And that's where my practice of sought through, I don't even know what it is today, prayer and meditation for 11, to keep it simple with that. And the meditation I learned from her that I still use is when I breathe in, I say God in, and I breathe out Shirley. So I go, God in, Shirley out. And I can do that with everything. God in, Shirley out. God in, anxiety out. Whatever is plaguing me, God in, because I know that my higher power is answers. It is serenity. It is peace. It is direction. It is everything I need to get me out of the feeling I'm having that I don't know what to do with. Because by doing those part of the steps and then working on 10, 11, and 12 with inventories and spiritual growth and helping others, I have come to realize that when I am upset and I think I want to drink, I actually just want to change the way I feel. And even after this much time, every time I have a new experience that I don't know what to handle and don't know how to deal with it, my brain immediately goes, you should have a drink. Thankfully, I've been trained enough that my brain also says, so you should call your sponsor, who says to me the same thing every time. Breathe in and breathe out. And then we stop and I breathe and I talk to my higher power. And then I can call people with the same experience that I'm going through in AA, which is just amazing. Since I have been sober, I have never once been able to find something that I am terminally unique at. We are all in this together. Everything, job losses, job gaining, promotions, not promotions, firing people, hiring people, losing loved ones, losing friends, dealing with newcomers, paying bills, everything that goes on in my life today, I can find someone in Alcoholics Anonymous to guide me through it. And they can tell me how they did it, either through grace and dignity or by their experience, how not to do it with grace and dignity. So I can solve all those problems. My daily 10th step, I had to stop doing it at night because I would start with, dear God, thank you for keeping me sober. And then I would be out like a light. So for me, most of the wreckage I make in my life today happens between 9 and 5 when I'm at work. That does tend to be where I owe the most amends. I work with homeless services, so sometimes there's a lot of emotion with clients. There's a lot of emotions with partner agencies. And if I'm going to lose it a little bit, that's usually where it is. So for me, I do that 10th step, that reflection upon my day, thinking about what happened on my way home so I can make amends promptly before everyone goes to bed. I still have time to call my sponsor who goes to bed at 8. And I can send apology, I can do whatever I need to do. In the mornings, as far as my staff know, I set a sock intention, but for me, because I do set a sock intention. I heard somebody talking about ties earlier today, mine are socks. But I follow the very simple part. It says, upon awakening, we think about the 24 hours ahead. That's pretty much it. It doesn't say you think about the 24 hours ahead and then go through 45 minutes of reading and 30 minutes of this and that. We think about the 24 hours ahead. And I do, and I think about the 24 hours ahead, and I look at my calendar, and then, because I like to have tangible things, when I open my sock drawer, I see what pair of socks calls to me based on that. And usually, if you're people who are alcoholics, I always get my little puns about my socks, but sometimes I need to be rocketed into the fourth dimension, and I have my cosmic alignment socks for that. And, and all day long, it's something I can look at and remind myself. In addition to saying the, serenity prayer, I can look at my socks and be like, oh yeah, today was a just be socks because they have honeycombs on them, or, today is this, today is that. Because I set my day up for success by just doing a little bit of meditation, by asking my higher power what to expect in the next 24 hours. Before I make bad mistakes, I've learned to pause and ask my higher power for direction. It does work most of the time these days. I still have to remember that my first thought is usually wrong. I should always pause and get a second opinion, even if it's from myself. And then step 12, the pandemic has really kind of changed the way that I'm of service. Zoom meetings have not been my friend. I'm really ADD with them. But we have been very fortunate that we've had a little bootleg meeting here in my backyard for most of the pandemic. It's a backyard bonfire book study. So we do a 12 and 12 study on Thursdays here in my backyard. It's at 7:15 if anybody's in the Hampton area. It's dark and cold right now, so we moved into a church, but from time change to time change, we're out there, and it's a wonderful group of women. And we go through the 12 and 12, a few paragraphs a week, and discuss it and talk about how we implement it in our lives. And it's a really great experience, and I've enjoyed having that throughout the pandemic. For years out in California, I was part of the steering committee for our group. Was organized differently because it was a fellowship center. I was a part of that, so I've had all the excitement of being part of those discussions about should we buy creamer in packets and creamers in tubs, and the pros and cons to each and every one of those choices, and sugar packets, and what's a prudent reserve. And there's always some people think we need 6 months. Some people think we need 3 months. Some people think we need $40 million. And what do we do with our surpluses? And, so I've had that experience, and I enjoyed it a lot. It taught me, for anybody who's new, it really taught me how to play well in the sandbox with others. Alcoholics Anonymous is a very, very safe place to learn how to do that. It seems silly when you go to this meeting, you're like, are you kidding me that we got these people in here fighting over whether to buy creamer in packets or in tubes? You have got to be kidding me. This is a waste of my time. They should just focus on being sober. But these little silly arguments that we have and discussions teach us how to do this in the real world, because the goal is to carry these principles practice these principles in all of our affairs. So me learning how to have a heated but polite discussion over the pros and cons of stir sticks of plastic and stir sticks of wood help me when I go to the office and I have to have really important discussions about, how do we do raises? Who do we choose to lay off? How do we do these things? I can have heated discussions about really important things now and not end up hurting feelings and having to make amends. And it's because I practiced. I have learned about saying mean things behind people's back on purpose and on accident in Alcoholics Anonymous. And now I don't have to do it in real life. Or when I do it in real life, I can say I'm sorry and I can mean it because I practiced in AA. And, all these things. I've also learned to eat a lot of desserts in AA. So thank you very much. I have learned that a pint is a single serving container. I see somebody giggling. They must have their Ben and Jerry's under the camera lens. But those are things I learned in here. It's okay to be humorous. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to have things that you like. My doctor would disagree. He thinks that, my cholesterol is a little too high for a pint. But because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've learned that, I can probably be satisfied with an ice cream bar. And if I can't, there's probably a group that ends in A to help me with that problem. Because, I've gone through phases in my sobriety where I have fallen back, and maybe I didn't have a drink of alcohol, but I've caught myself being a little too attached to the Indian casinos that send you $5 a week that cost you $100. And I've found myself eating far too many Ben and Jerry's and donuts. And I've caught myself buying things I don't need to buy. And those are all just more symptoms of my dis-ease within myself, that I need to work with a higher power and a sponsor to try to keep on track. We don't get cured when we come in here, but we get better, and I'm always very grateful that I stay just sick enough that I have to keep coming back, because I just love my people. I love my alcoholics, and I love watching us all grow and change and struggle and succeed in everything that we do together, as this body of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, since 1932, who'd have thunk that a couple of drunk people could get themselves sober and share it with all of us? So I don't know what I'm doing on time. The Zoom's really, like I said, challenging for me. 8:46. So that's what it's like now. For anybody who cares about my qualifications, I drank a lot. I grew up in what I thought was a perfectly normal house. Now that I've, been in a lot of therapy and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, I realized it was a perfectly normal house for households that have a lot of mental illness and alcoholism. But I started drinking really early. I was 2, and I stole all the scotch and waters off the table when my parents went out to show somebody something they'd planted in the backyard. So I had asked them that, what'd you guys do? They're like, I'll put you to bed. So apparently, even at the age of 2, my parents thought that, the best way to sleep off a drunk is to just put the baby in the crib. But, I was a daddy's girl. I followed him around all over the place, and I'd help with the yard work, and he'd let me have a sip of the beer. And then I'd go back and get another sip of the beer and another sip of the beer. And I'm also the kind of kid that as soon as I learned that spinning made you feel different and cool, I would spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. So there is definitely something in me that wants to not feel the way I am feeling. There is something in me that wants to change the way I feel. By the time I was old enough to babysit, I was old enough to drink all of your liquor and all of your wine while you were out. Apparently the people I babysat for came home drunker than I got unsupervised, because they kept asking me back and I kept drinking their booze. That's a whole nother level of amends, right? Like, hi, remember me, the babysitter? Yeah, I'm glad your children didn't die, because I was not a good babysitter, also important, so I did that. And then by the time I turned 21 and I had unlimited access to alcohol, I was done. I was off and running. I am a bar drinker. I drank at Acapulco's on Monday because they had $2 margaritas and $5 half pitchers. They'd always ask if you wanted one of those silly little floater things to keep your beer cold. And we were like, why? Like, whose beer gets warm? On Tuesdays I was at Hennessy's. On Wednesdays I was, up at Kelly's. On Thursdays I was here. On Fridays I was here. And it turns out that I was doing that because I didn't know it at the time. At the time I was doing that because I was learning that I didn't want anybody to see exactly how much I was drinking. So as far as the people on Monday night were concerned, it was like, oh, here comes the drunk Monday person. The Tuesday people were like, oh, here comes the drunk Tuesday person. And a couple times in my life, those worlds had collided. And it felt very weird that the Monday people and the Wednesday people and the Friday people and the work people were all in one place. And it was kind of one of those few glimpses that you get before you get sober of, wow, something's really off with my life compared to other people's. So I had all that going on. I'm very grateful that I didn't get a DUI. I honestly don't know why. I am a bar drinker and I did not Uber. We didn't have Uber. Cabs are not overly popular in Southern California where I was. And I just got incredibly blessed that I did not have a DUI. And more importantly, that I did not take someone out with my driving. I'm a one eye open. I take the crazy back roads on the mountain roads and down Laguna Canyon because my belief was, which I think is pretty wise for an alcoholic, was like, well, the road's too winding and narrow for the police to sit on the shoulder. That was how I chose those routes. Less likely to be safe, but less likely to have police officers hiding around the corner because there's no shoulder. So I was doing all of those things. I don't feel like, qualifying is that important. Nobody really wakes up one day, say, I'm really struggling to make friends. Maybe I'll go hang out with those alcoholics. I heard they accept everyone. But I've definitely got enough drinking in me that I'm done. And if anybody's concerned whether or not they maybe are an alcoholic, I'd be happy to, talk to you about your experiences and see if they match mine. Because I found that 99% of the time, those of us in these rooms, they do match. Never woke up and said, maybe I should see if I'm an alcoholic. Nobody walks into the rooms asking that unless they're probably in the right place. But anyways, I'm going to turn this back over to the leader. I don't need to just keep rambling. And if you have a court card, you can be excited that you might get out a few minutes early. I guess you don't sign court cards in Zoom land, do we? But if you're antsy, you might get out a few minutes early. So I guess, Stephen, I'll turn it back to you.